First, let me show you something interesting. Alright, so just like the Phenomenology Spirit, where I made my own little edited copy with some term changes and some fixes, with some terms that were inconsistent that I had noticed, I have made a Science of Logic version of that for myself. These are the term changes that I have. This is an edited version of the Giovanni, the Cambridge translation of the Science of Logic. So far I've done everything up to the end of chapter 3. Giovanni, for whatever reason, has one word in German. I forget what the word is. He uses it as, he translates it as reference, but the word literally is relation, so I changed relation. As always, I changed sublation to upheaval. Since, I'm the oddball here, I have to explain it every single time. Upheaval has two meanings. One main meaning is strong disruption, sudden disruption, which goes well with cancellation in Aufhebung. Upheaval also means to heave up, to lift up, to uplift. It usually only has a physical meaning to that, but I mean uplift also used to have a physical, just roll an uplift into upheaval. There you go, you have the raising as a qualitative. And then the preservation is in uphold. If you upheave something, if you heave it up, you're upholding it while you're heaving up. And if you heave something up, it means that you're placing it up in a higher position, which is also upholding it. And uphold has a connotation of maintenance, of preserving in one way, in general, so it works. So upheaval, uphold, uplift, all rolled into one word. Nothing in the first chapter I've changed to not. I'll explain it when we get there. I can explain it now, I suppose. It's only if used for pure nothing. Otherwise, if it's just a regular nothing, I just use nothing. Giovanni has Dasein as existence. I changed that to presence. I'm not the only one who's changed it to presence. I noticed that Miller also occasionally uses presence for Dasein. And in the Fuss-Dobbins translation of the Phenomenology of Spirit, they use presence for Dasein a lot. And Hegel uses Dasein a lot. I've changed restriction in the second chapter, which is Schranke. I don't know how to pronounce that in German, but I changed it to bound. You'll see why. And I added a few differences of just single terms to the many infinites in the second chapter. And I also changed shine to semblance and show, which is what Miller has. On top of that, I have added Miller paragraph numbers, and I've also kept the Giovanni section numbers. Giovanni just takes them for the Gesamte Werke. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's like the collected works of Hegel in German, the academic editorial version, and they number by these very loose, they're not very specific, just sections. So, some of these go as long as 2 pages, and so citing by section is not that helpful. It doesn't tell you very granularly where to look. They're not tied to a paragraph, they're just tied more to a region in a page. So I find them less useful than the Miller numbers. So I've added Miller numbers to my version. And I've also done that because I have the German original second edition of the Science of Logic, where I have also added the Miller numbers. And I get to then cross-check very... it's very easy compared to what I usually have to do. So, now I just have to go look at what paragraph I'm on and just look up that paragraph rather than what I used to do, which is have to dig around through the paragraphs, find out which paragraph is what, because the paragraphs, even in the German, depending on the publisher or the person who did the editing, they're split differently. So there's no singular set of paragraphs that anybody's following. Likewise, if you look at the Giovanni and the Miller, they split their paragraphs differently. So if you don't know German very much, that makes it very hard to find out what is referenced to what. And even if you do know some German, to eyeball things, the fact that the paragraphs are not one-to-one split in the way that they're structured makes it really, really hard, even if you do. Because if something's in the middle of a paragraph that's like 2 pages long, which Hegel does do, good luck finding it. And especially if you don't know German, so you can't translate the English back into German. Modern German is not Hegel's German. And two, unless you know Hegel's Germans, you don't know exactly which word he used, so you can't easily look up stuff, except for some technical terms, I suppose. But I'm not very good at that. So this is very helpful. I've done it all the way up to chapter 3 as well. So that includes all the prefaces up to chapter 3. This is the German with the numbers. I will also, I suppose, add in the GW numbers that Giovanni uses. And I guess I'll upload that on my blog because that's really useful. I mean, obviously, if you know German, you're not bothered by this. But if you're like me and you're kind of halfway in, halfway out, or you're just like, kind of a nerdy person who finds this stuff interesting and wants to check it out, it's very hard. It's very time consuming. So hopefully this stuff will make it a lot easier. Well, it's not hopefully. It will make it a lot easier for people who are interested to easily check things up. And this obviously allows you, since this is the Giovanni translation, since it has the same paragraph numbers as the Miller translation, and it has this, and then the German, I've added the same numbers and I've split them the same way. This makes it so that you can compare all 3 translations of the Science of Logic in English pretty easily and quickly. So, pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm trying to use up my time as best as I can. I've been really focused on this for like the last week. Partly it's out of interest. Partly it's stuff is happening in my life regarding the health of my parents, which is troubling. And I think, in a way, I'm trying to distract myself by doing these time-consuming editorial things that are rather mechanical. I would have an AI do it, but I don't really trust AIs. Like, at least the free ones, they suck. And even the ones that you can pay for, you still have to double check. And I mean, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do it myself and at least like learn some German on the way, which, even the last couple of days that I've been working on numbering the German, I've learned, a few more technical words here and there so that I can like eyeball a sentence and tell whether it's the sentence I'm looking for or not. So anyways, actually let me put this on the other window so I can have it ready to read. About chat. All right, Jimmy. So, Jimmy, you say you like the Bad Infinite. I don't like the Bad Infinite. I don't like mouthfuls. I mean, that's something about my name, for example, that I didn't like for a long time. It feels like a mouthful. It's only 3 syllables, but it feels like a mouthful. It also, it's not a common phrase. It doesn't sound like something you'd say. But the unlimited is used in a more broad sense by people to mean, this kind of Bad Infinite that Hegel's talking about. The unlimited, God is the unlimited, the unbound. And this has a stronger connotation in what I've heard in English. And this is not about around philosophical people. This is around people who are kind of like mystical and stuff. Kind of like New Agey and, Eastern religion kind of thing, they would mention something like the unlimited, and what they mean is Hegel's bad infinite. It's the infinite which is not the finite, which is against the finite. Oh boy. Well, Mr. Vegan over there, just don't spam my chat, and God bless you. But anyways, you'll see once we get to it, it rolls off the tongue much better to call it the unlimited, and there's also the infinite progress, which is just the endless, and then you have, instead of saying the true infinite, you just say the infinite, and it's much easier to track in my view. I mean, it's not that like that portion of Hegel is anything confusing. It's just like a lot of different infinites, and I mean, we got words in English to split the meanings quite fine, so why not? So anyways, yeah. So if you would like this document, I will go ahead and share it with you. Send me an email. Now, obviously, I can't put this up publicly because this is copyrighted material. At least like the Giovanni copy. Until I modify it to a greater extent, then I could probably claim some part of it of my own, and I wouldn't be too worried about it. So anyways, yeah, most people do understand the bad infinite. It's not hard to understand. It's not hard to keep track of either. It's just I like differentiation in terms when you can have them, and I also like identity in terms when you need them. And the unlimited and the endless and the infinite are just synonyms, and also the unbound. And bound is one of the changes that I made in finitude. And you can play around with those quite a lot. So anyways, I'm going to read and comment through this. I don't think I have any recording where I have gone through the prefaces and introductions. All the other recordings I have, I think I only went directly to chapter 1. But I was rereading these with somebody recently, a young man, I mean really young, he's probably just barely in university, but he's been studying Yugana, a Christian mystical like Neoplatonist philosopher. And that guy is, I've known about him, and I know that he's considered one of the speculative thinkers in genuine speculative sense of speculative philosophy. So this guy is really good at catching on to these speculative turns. So I was reading these with him, and we got all the way to chapter 1, and then at chapter 1 he kind of got stuck with like the whole issue of the presuppositionalist thing. Is it fair to say that nothing is pure mediation? That's how I frame it. Being is immediate immediacy, and that nothing is immediate mediation. And I mean, it pairs well with the experience you're supposed to have. I mean, Hegel's not appealing to experience, but it is the intuition of meaning that we have. So anyways, like I said, if you want this, I'll send it to you. Email me. My email is, let me put my email here, because apparently people told me that it doesn't show up very well on the YouTube page anymore. So send me an email there. Ask me for it. I'll send you the file. It's basically done. I'm not going to be working on it much more for a long time. And I mean, this is the big chunk that I've actually worked on, this last decade. So I mean, it's the one that I have the most urgency to check out. do intend that hopefully, if things stay fine with the health situation, which has me a bit worried, a bit stressed, not gonna lie. My mom's going in for brain surgery next Monday. It's always touchy. But be that as it may, I will try to continue the German numbering and hopefully get through the entire Science of Logic with that, and then I'll put that up on my blog, and who knows, maybe send it to like Marxist Archive or something, like some, because it's very useful to have those numbered paragraphs. So, anyways. The Objective Logic, Book 1, The Doctrine of Being, Preface to the First Edition. Let me get rid of this. The complete transformation that the ways of philosophical thought have undergone among us, in the past 25 odd years, the higher standpoint in self-awareness that spirit has attained in this period of time has so far had little influence on the shape of the logic. By the way, I think there is a book called The 25 Years of Philosophy, from Kant to Hegel, which tries to go over like the entire post-Kantian movement and German idealism up to and finalized with Hegel. It's a good book. The people who I respect, vouch for it, so I will vouch for it as well. What was hitherto called metaphysics has been, so to speak, extirpated root and branch and has vanished from the ranks of the sciences. Where are the voices still to be heard of the ontology of former times, of the rational psychology, the cosmology, or indeed even of the natural theology of the past? Or where are they allowed to be heard? Inquiries, for instance, into the immateriality of the soul, into mechanical and final causes, where is interest in them still to be found? Even the former proofs of God's existence are cited only out of historical interest, or for the purpose of edification and the uplifting of the mind. The fact is that interest, whether in the content or in the form of the former metaphysics, or in both together, has been lost. Remarkable as it is, if a people has become indifferent, for instance, to its constitutional law, to its convictions, its moral customs and virtues, just as remarkable it is when a people loses its metaphysics, when the spirit engaged with its pure essence is no longer really present in its life. The exoteric teaching of the Kantian philosophy, that the understanding ought not to be allowed to soar above experience, lest the cognitive faculty become a theoretical reason that by itself would beget nothing but mental fancies. This was the justification coming from the scientific camp for renouncing speculative thought. In support of this popular doctrine, there was added the cry of alarm of modern pedagogy that the pressing situation of the time called for attention to immediate needs, that just as in the ways of knowledge experience is first, so for skill in public and private life, exercise and practical education are the essential. They alone what is required, while theoretical insight is even harmful. With science and common sense thus working hand in hand to cause the downfall of metaphysics, the singular spectacle came into view of a cultivated people without metaphysics, like a temple richly ornamented in other respects, but without a holy of holies. Theology, which in former times was the custodian of the speculative mysteries and of the albeit subordinate metaphysics, had relinquished this last science in exchange for feelings, popular practicality, and erudite historiography. And it was in keeping with this change that, for their part, those solitary individuals whom their people had exiled from the world and dedicated to the contemplation of the eternal also disappeared. Theirs was a life devoted exclusively to the service of contemplation, without practical gain, but only for the sake of blessedness, and their disappearance can be regarded as essentially the same phenomenon, though in a different context as the one just mentioned. And so this darkness, this colorless self-preoccupation of spirit bent upon itself, having been dispelled, presence shown transformed into the bright world of flowers, of which is well known none is black. Let's see. Jimmy Torrison says, reading pre-Hegelian German philosophy makes these prefaces feel like the height of literature. I don't know. I haven't read those, so I wouldn't know. I mean, the most I've read is like Fichte and, the two introductions to the 1894 version of the Wissenschaftslehre, the Science of Knowledge, and the first chapter, I think. And I didn't think that was bad. I haven't read any Schelling directly, so I wouldn't know how bad Schelling is with his introductions. I do know that at least like outside of like the German sphere that I've read, the Enlightenment thinkers, I don't like any of them. I do think like they're... I mean, well, it was a style of writing that was just a thing at the time, It's they weren't literary writers; they were very dry. Exploratory piano. Do you remember the part near the beginning where he argues that 1 does not equal 1? I recall being blown away by it, but forget the proof. Any insights? Well, who are you talking about? Are you talking about Hegel or are you talking about Fichte? I know, like, Hegel doesn't use 1 equals 1. Hegel uses A equals A. And Fichte also uses A equals A. Fichte is the one who first mentioned that, A equals A is a contradiction in that, like, the first A is clearly not the second A in order to make the identity. Science of logic. Yeah, if it's a science of logic, I don't know. He doesn't use 1 equals 1. He uses A equals A. At least here. Maybe in quantity he might mention something like that, but I don't know. I haven't read Quantity. I read like only the beginnings of it. Jimmy, pre-Hegelian philosophy was not bad. I'm saying that the way these prefaces say things will blow you away if you know the context. Even if you don't know the context, these blow you away. Like Hegel has some gems that he brings up, and they're very powerful arguments. So far, there's not much to say. This is kind of just a historical gloss that he's giving. The nihilism that we are caught up in was already something that was noticed to be going into full swing already by Hegel's time, like in the 1800s, like the beginning of the 1800s. So we've been culturally in the deep end pretty bad for a couple hundred years now. So let's go to 4. Logic did not fare quite as badly as metaphysics. That from logic one learns how to think, which for lack of anything else was considered its usefulness and therefore its purpose, just as if one were to learn how to digest or to move first from the study of anatomy and physiology. This is a prejudice that has long been put to rest, and in this respect the spirit of practicality certainly did not intend any better fate for logic than it did for its sister science. This is something that it's hard to accept when you grow up with like the liberal progressive bias and ideals. But through experience, I have come to accept that no, this is the case. For one, it is easy to see that indeed, like, logic does not teach people thinking. Kant has an essay. I don't know what it's titled. I mean, I can look it up right now, as a matter of fact, of course. So I shall. Let's see. Because he has an essay on how you can't teach good judgment. So you can teach somebody to reason, validly, but that doesn't teach people to reason about things that are actually true. All right, so apparently, apparently in the Critique of Pure Reason, it's in the Transcendental Doctrine of Judgment that he talks about this. Anyways. Formal logic doesn't teach good judgment. People can think validly about stupid things. Bad inputs in, bad outputs out. No, bad inputs, bad outputs. Garbage in, garbage out. Luke, is this related to the true correct distinction? Secondarily, it's not primarily related. I mean, this is just based on the fact that you can have mechanical logic that will keep identities and will keep negations, but you put garbage in, you get garbage out. Ilyankov has an essay titled "Our Schools Must Teach How to Think," in which he explicitly goes against Kant, and he says that he doesn't believe that is the case. He thinks that we can teach good thinking, good logic, good judgment. But obviously, it's not by teaching formal logic. Like Ilyankov could tell that. It's also the case that it's not going to be by teaching people lists of categories or anything like that. In a way, I think Ilyankov is right. But he was also far more optimistic than I am. I do think that you can teach good judgment, but good judgment is nothing other than concrete problem solving. And so what you want to do is to teach people how to think concretely with abstractions. You can teach people how to think concretely, but to teach concretely in abstractions, I don't think there's any school system that does this. Probably the only one that might even care to do something like this would be the Waldorf education, because Steiner was a philosophy nerd as well as very interested in these things. So if anybody would have tried something like this, it'd probably be them. And I don't know. I don't know anybody who's gone to Waldorf school, and you can watch videos of people giving their testimony about how great their Waldorf education was, but I can't say that I can tell whether they're good at reasoning or not with those. I mean, they do have a holistic worldview, which is better than not having one. Jimmy, the Ilyankov essay is actually pretty good. It's very interesting. So logic is still metaphysics was thrown away by Hegel's own time. People weren't interested. People weren't interested in the history of philosophy. They just thought, well, all that philosophy really gives us is logic, and why do we need to study all these false ideas of the past that we know are false now? They're useless. When we could just study logic, and logic is at least useful. At least they thought it was useful for learning how to think, which it's not true. Obviously, once the analytic revolution happened in the 1900s, this completely changed. Formal logic did become very practically useful all of a sudden, mainly because machines are stupid, and so you need a stupid logic that's just as mechanical as machines are, in order to have a frame and model for how to get them to do what you want. So 5. Ooh, that's a missing space. Nevertheless, probably for the sake of a certain formal utility, a place was still allowed for it among the sciences. It was even retained as a subject of public instruction. However, this better lot concerns only the outer fate of logic, for its shape and content have remained the same throughout, a long inherited tradition, though progressively more diluted and emaciated in the course of the transmission. No trace is so far to be detected in it of the new spirit that has awakened the sciences, no less than in the world of actuality. However, once the substantial form of the spirit has reconstituted itself, it is of no avail to want to retain the forms of an earlier culture. These are like withered leaves pushed aside by the new buds already being generated at their roots. So, I mean, this is a callback to something that Hegel talks about in the phenomenology of spirit as well, which is we can't go back. You know, as much as people pine, Rome was so great, we need to be more, we need to go back to Rome. You can't go back. You're not Roman. You can't be Roman. You can't go back to Greece. You're not Greek. You can't be Greek. Even the Greeks can't be Greeks of the ancient kind. There are no genuine pagans today, for example. You can't be pagan. Nobody actually believes in Zeus. You don't see people going around and doing sacrifices and actually believing they're going to do shit. The people who actually do, they're fucking wackos. They're not the people you want around you. It's your crazy, uncle or something that's out in the midnight in the desert, sacrificing animals and stuff. It's closer more to like demonic shit. I mean, so we can't really go back to these substantial forms. I mean, it's something that Hegel says explicitly in the phenomenology in respect to, the Stoics. He explicitly says this about the Stoics, that, because Stoicism is kind of a perennial ideal that people have. It's very enticing to people, and they're like, oh, I want to be a Stoic. And they don't understand that Stoicism is not a set of beliefs. Stoicism was a whole life, a whole way of life. It was a religion, a way of life, a way of thinking. It's like Buddhism. Buddhism is not some logic. It's not a philosophy. It's a whole life package. You can't actually be a Stoic today. Like, the world of the Stoics just doesn't exist. The metaphysics that the Stoics believe in people don't believe in them anymore. Same thing like, with Buddhists. If you're a Western Buddhist, chances are that you can't actually be a Buddhist because you just don't live in the background of a world that actually believes in reincarnation and actually believes in karma and all these other things. And even if you're in modern India, it's hard to do that because increasingly, like, people are just becoming atheistic anyways. Jimmy, Nietzsche said the proof that Christianity is dead is that they don't kill atheists anymore. Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good argument. Likewise, you have a lot of these Christians today, Christian nationalists and Christian monarchists, and they want to go back to the Middle Ages as if, one, the Middle Ages were so fucking great, which they weren't, and two, as if you can genuinely have a medieval mindset anymore. You can't. We got the internet. We have general literacy. We have the history in which, we've gone through generations in which we know what they think. We know why they thought things. We know why things changed. And we just can't take those things seriously anymore. Not in that way. Most people who go to church don't really believe that if they pray, they're going to get a miracle. Most people, there's like liberal Christianity is increasingly growing, and liberal Christianity doesn't take the Bible literally, doesn't take the commandments very literally. They focus on a lot of historical hedging and whatnot for reinterpretation. Some liberal Christians don't even believe that Jesus was divine or anything. They just thought he was a great humanist teacher or whatever. You just can't go back. 6. Also in the scientific realm, this ignoring of the universal change is gradually beginning to lose ground. The new ideas have imperceptibly become the accepted currency even to those opposed to them. And if these continue to fuss about their sources and principles and to dispute them, they have nevertheless surrendered to their consequences, unable to fend off their influence. They have no other way of giving a positive importance and some content to their increasingly irrelevant negative attitude, except by falling in with the new ways of thinking. So yeah, to give you an example with Christianity, Uh, Orthodox Christians and Catholics, but very particularly like heavily with Orthodox Christians, they're a very insular tradition. They don't like you reading people outside the tradition. They don't like you bringing in ideas outside from the tradition. Nonetheless, even these people find themselves, forced to engage and draw upon the resources of other traditions that are not their own, which are more modern. Take something like J. Dyer and the Transcendental Argument for God. That's not an Orthodox argument. That's a neo-Kantian kind of argument, in a way. But nonetheless, J. Dyer, this giant ortho bro, nonetheless, despite how much he hates Western ideas and Western philosophy, he's got to draw upon Western philosophy for his favorite go-to argument, for proving God. Go figure. Likewise, even just to argue against things, if you're Hegelian, you want to break into the discourse of analytics and continentals, you have to speak their lingo. They're not going to speak your lingo. They're not going to care. So you have to learn to speak their tongue and fight within their turf. And that's going to affect you. It's going to change the certain ways in which you think about things just by framing yourself against them. Which, it's not a bad thing. It happens. The intermixing of ideas has to happen. But I leave that to other people better fit for that than I am. I'm just a nerd who's slowly being bogged down in Hegel for quite a long time. So 7. However, the period of fermentation that goes with the beginning of every new creation seems to be past. In its first manifestation, a new creation usually behaves towards the entrenched systematization of the earlier principle with fanatical hostility. In fear of losing itself in the expansion of the particular, it also shuns the labor that goes with scientific cultivation, and nevertheless, in need of it, it grasps at first at an empty formalism. The demand for the elaboration and cultivation of the material becomes at that point all the more pressing. There is a period in the formation of an epoch in which, just as in the formation of the individual, the foremost concern is the acquisition and reinforcement of the principle in its undeveloped intensity. But the higher demand is that such a principle should be made into science. The typical Hegelian developmentalism. In case you don't know, development is huge for Hegel. And obviously all developments begin simple and they get complex. You begin with, a simple sperm and an egg cell, 2 single cells, and then you get a mass of cells into a zygote, then into a fetus, which then just becomes a full-blown human being, or any kind of a baby of any animal. And he says this, so in its first manifestation, a new creation usually behaves towards the entrenched systemization of the earlier principle with fanatical hostility. It's like the French Revolution. Every time you have a genuine revolution, things move fast and people switch sides so quickly. What was popular yesterday all of a sudden is completely unpopular and bad and evil today. And this happens in philosophy. Look at how quickly the analytic turn and the continental turn happened against the entire history of philosophy, which had seen itself as one giant continuous thing up until, Hegel. And then Hegel's like the big break. All of a sudden, everybody goes against Hegel. The continentals go against Hegel. The analytics go against Hegel. And everybody looks back at all of the history and starts picking it and tearing it apart. For all the failures and just going, we just need to get rid of all these things and restart anew. And it happens. That just seems to indeed be the way that new ideas come about. And if you look at the at people who are quote unquote Hegelians, they're also this way too. They're very antagonistic towards the old ways. I'm very antagonistic to the old ways, and I'm ahead of the time. I'm ahead of the curve. One day everybody will look back and say, "Wow, can't believe there was such a thing as analytic philosophy." So 8. Now, whatever might already have happened to the substance and form of science. Oh, one more thing to add is what you start out with this completely antithetical fanaticism, but eventually people chill. Eventually society chills, and people like look back at all these things that people trashed and go, you know what? It wasn't so bad. As a matter of fact, some of it was good, and we ought to take it back. I mean, you're seeing in our own lifetimes. You're seeing that there is a conservative backlash against the rapid liberalization and how that's gone. The analytics had a huge turnaround against metaphysics, against language, and then somewhere in the last 40 years, they started looking at these things again, and then all these things people said like, well, they're useless. Metaphysics, all of a sudden, they're acceptable, and they're like, well, actually, they're important to look at. Happens everywhere. So 8. Now, whatever might already have happened to the substance and form of science in other respects, the science of logic that makes up metaphysics proper or pure speculative philosophy has to date been much neglected. What I more precisely understand by this science and its standpoint, I have provisorily stated in the introduction. The fact that it was necessary to make a completely fresh start with this science, the nature itself of its subject matter, and the lack of any previous work that could have been used for the undertaken reform of it. Actually, let me just, since I'm reading this while I'm going, I might as well do some edits on the fly. Sometimes the Giovanni sometimes is just like way too German and like, just reads awkwardly, and it can be rephrased. The nature of its subject matter itself. There you go, that bugs me. So as I'll go rereading this, I'll also be rephrasing certain things, because things can be more clear. Awkward phrasing helps nobody. I mean, I understand it, but believe me, a decade ago, a certain sentence in Giovanni's version confused the hell out of me for weeks in the section on reality in chapter 2. And then until it dawned on me to look at the Miller, and then Miller's just makes it clear. Provisionally. Provisionally, you're right. I did not see that. Thank you. Provisionally. I mean, I don't know why he said provisorily. I mean, it's correct, but it's also just like, who says that? Awkward English. So where was I? So the fact that it was necessary to make complete fresh start of science, the nature of its subject matter itself, and the lack of any previous work that could have been used for the undertaken reform of it, may be taken into account by the fair-minded critic if even a labor of many years was unable to give this effort a greater perfection. The essential point to be kept in mind is that an altogether new concept of scientific procedure is at work here. As I have remarked elsewhere, Inasmuch as philosophy is to be science, it cannot borrow its method from a subordinate science, such as mathematics, any more than it can remain satisfied with categorical assurances of inner intuition, or can make use of argumentation based on external reflection. On the contrary, it can only be the nature of the content which is responsible for movement in scientific knowledge, for it is the content's own reflection that first posits and generates what that content is. Hegel uses reflection in a double sense. Reflection both in the sense of, reflect on yourself, like think about something or think about yourself. So to reflect is to think about. And reflection in a literal sense, that when you have the concept, its reflection is, it's split with itself while remaining itself. So that's its reflection. It's content's own reflection that first posits and generates what that content is. So both the thinking of the content is what generates the content, but also the literal structure of reflection as the split within it, which is a mirror split, as you can see, is also what generates the content itself. So it's both an ontological and a cognitive act. So that's what reflection means, that it's cognitive and ontological. So 9. The understanding determines and holds the determination fixed. Reason is negative and dialectical, since it dissolves the determinations of the understanding into nothing. It is positive, since it generates the universal and comprehends the particular therein. Just as the understanding is usually taken as something separate from reason in general, so also dialectical reason is taken as something separate from positive reason. In its truth, reason is, however, spirit, which is higher than both reason bound to the understanding and understanding bound to reason. It is the negative, that which constitutes the quality of both the dialectical reason and the understanding. It negates the simple, thereby posits the determinate difference of the understanding, but it equally dissolves this difference, and so it is dialectical. But spirit does not stay at the nothing of this result, but is in it rather equally positive, and thereby restores the first simplicity, but as universal, such as it is concrete in itself. A given particular is not subsumed under this universal, but, on the contrary, it has already been determined together with the determining of the difference and the dissolution of this determining. So, there you go. That's a nice little summary of method. So, something I'm also doing, which I did also for the phenomenology, is I titled little sections. Which is very useful, and I don't get why, they didn't do that for the actual, translated officially translated text. It's not that hard, man. There's no reason to make things not easy to follow. Why not? As you're writing this whole thing, you can tell which paragraphs go together and have a thematic, and all the introductions have big chunks of themes. So why not just label them? It's easy. Bibles do it, and that's great, by the way. I love that Bibles do that. I don't remember that when I was going to church 18 years ago, any of the Bibles that I looked at had section headings telling you what they were about, but I see that apparently most Bibles nowadays do. It's very nice. Everybody should do that. It's very useful. I don't see why they don't. So the understanding determines, reason is negative and dialectical, and Hegel's assuming that you do know about Kant right there. That's a reference to Kant's dialectical antinomies. Since it dissolves determination of understanding into nothing, so, this dialectic is skeptical, and that it brings things to nothing. It destroys their differences, but it also then leaves nothing to identify. It is positive since it generates the universal and comprehends the particular therein. So reason is negative. It's hard to give a summary about what reason and understanding are for Hegel, because they're very broad. The main thing is that the understanding is what he says. It determines and holds the determinations fixed. So the understanding identifies and differentiates. Reason here is reason as in active reasoning. It's not a static reason like, a formal syllogism kind of reason, but it's reason as the active movement of content. Your thinking. It's not thought, it's thinking. So reasoning is negative and dialectical. Reasoning is what leads to discovering that these distinctions or differences that the understanding makes collapse into each other. And that's why it's dialectical, that it shows that they're just as valid, they're just as correct, and you basically might as well just say they're just as true. But reason also, in collapsing things, at the same time regenerates them. It is positive since it generates the universal and comprehends the particular then. So even though it has a differences, understanding fixes the difference. Reason sees their collapse as the dialectic. But this collapse for the understanding looks like total collapse to nothing. But for reason, that's not a collapse. For reason, it's just a swap. It's the same structure, but just swapping. And when it notices that the collapse, or what looks like the collapse, is just the rebound. So there's a collapse and a rebound. That rebound is the reestablishing of the positive, in which, because you have this and you have this, you have a unity, and a universal is a unity. So that's why it generates the universal. And rather than understanding, it is comprehending. The word comprehension has prehension, which is grasping. So when you understand, the word is literal, it's understanding. So, you get under the thing to the substance. That's why the understanding is also the thinking of substance, substantial thinking. It's stuck, and its limit is in essence thinking. But reason does not understand, reason comprehends, it grasps. It unifies things together, but in unifying, it also has to have a difference. Let me know if that makes sense. So in its truth, reason, however, is spirit, which is higher than both reason bound to the understanding and understanding bound to reason. So spirit, it means both what you think spirit does, but it also means mind. So obviously, what is the actual thing that reasons? Well, it's mind that reasons. And what is mind? Well, mind is nothing but really the process of reasoning, but reasoning not only in a cognitive sense, reasoning in an ontological sense as well. Meaning, so if in the cognitive sense I'm reflecting the structure of reality, in the ontological sense, reasoning is the structuring of reality itself. So it's this process of structuring and collapse, or the dialectic. And dialectic here is both the reversal or the inversion, but it's also the development. So again, let me know if that makes any sense. So it is the negative. And actually, that bound is not the right form. bound by reason bound to the understanding. Well, no, bound is... No, it is. It's right. That's one of the changes. It would in Giovanni's it says restricted. The Miller says limited to the understanding, but bound to. Yeah, that's also proper. Reason versus the understanding is something I found very applicable in everyday life. It's a very good distinction, just like correct and true is a very good distinction. Once you have it, you're like, yeah, that's very useful. Makes sense of a lot of things. So, spirit is higher than both reason bound to the understanding and understanding bound to reason. It is the negative, that which constitutes the quality of both the dialectical reason and the understanding. It negates the simple, thereby posits the determinate difference of the understanding, but it equally dissolves this difference, and so it is dialectical. So you have the simplicity, you have the determinate difference, and then you have the dialectical. It looks like it's collapsing, but it's just the inversion which maintains a structure. But spirit does not stay at the nothing of this result, but is in it rather equally positive, and thereby restores the first simplicity, but as universal, such as it is concrete in itself. A given particular is not subsumed under this universal, but on the contrary, it has already been determined together with the determining of the difference and the dissolution of this determining. So you have the first simplicity, which is an abstract unity, more like this. Then you have the determinate, the difference. Then you have the dialectic. Then you have kind of this secondary collapse, but it's always really this. You know, it's the infinite sign, the infinite symbol, which is a universal because it's a unity of these two. It is concrete because it has details. You know, something abstract, it has no details or it lacks detail. What has more details is more concrete. Again, particular is not subsumed under this universal, so these two are not subsumed under this. They're expressions of this. You see this, and these mirror this. So they're mirrors of the universal structures. They're individuations, particularizations of the universal. So the usual way that people treat universals as kind of like these holes that things fit in doesn't work. But Hegel's is very different. Hegel's is more Platonic, in which you can literally talk about participation, and participation quite literally is particularity. A thing participates insofar as it's a part, and it's a part insofar as it is particular. So on the contrary, it has already been determined together with the determining of the difference and the dissolution of the determining. So the parts are not distinct from this process in which they are parted, which is the whole thing. So the whole, which does this and returns to this or collapses to this, all of that is one thing actually. So it's already determined together with the determining difference and the dissolution of this determining. So the movement and the structure are one thing. They're not the same moment, they're not the same part, but they are part of the one same thing. See, Mr. Limonetto says, for comparison, Kant's system posits the understanding as the faculty of empirical thought and reason as the faculty of ideas. The object of the understanding is a thing of perception. Continued. And the object of reason is the understanding itself. Yeah, exactly. So you can see, Tillerson says, exactly so you can see how Hegel gets to reason as negative and dialectical, because Kant's critique of pure reason is that it falls into contradiction with itself in the antinomies. Yeah. The Nero, hello. So, yeah, that's a good description of method right there. Or Well, it is it is a description of method. It's just a description of structure and method. So, this spiritual movement, which in its simplicity gives itself its determinateness, and in this determinateness gives itself its self-equality, this movement, and I mean, when you think literal with Hegel's words, like his language is very literal. You know, if this is the immediate universal, and this is its differentiation, and this is the image of its entire structure, here's the reflected image of the original. Here's the other reflected image of the original. They're in contact with each other. They are the one self, which in this is self-equal because it's relating back to itself. It's cohering with itself, and it's also corresponding directly with itself and regenerating itself. That's what an actual equality or identity is. I don't think that's hard to understand. I don't think that's hard to explain. But you know, maybe I'm too Hegel-brained at this point that I don't remember what it's like to think outside this box, or rather, not outside this box. What it is to think inside the box of the understanding. So let me know if that makes any sense. So to do self-equality, this movement, which is thus the imminent development of the concept, is the absolute method of the concept, the absolute method of cognition. And should be capitalized right here. Forgot that I haven't done that pass. Because it's not just this concept, it's the concept of concepts. Same time, the immanent soul of the content. So, I mean, like, he repeats this multiple times throughout this book, and yet people don't believe it. You know, like Neo-Kantian readers, the non-metaphysical readers of Hegel, like Pippin, they read this, and they just refuse to accept it, and they ignore that it's there. They're like, oh, well, Hegel's just giving a theory of cognition. How? He's literally telling you right here, it's not just the absolute method of cognition, it's also the immanent soul of the content, meaning what? It's the ontology, it's the metaphysics itself. It's not just a theory of cognition. It's not just the ways in which, you know, our discursive understanding understands. So, on this self-constructing path alone, I say, is philosophy capable of being objective demonstrative science. So there you go. I mean, self-constructing path, self-generative method, the self-conceiving concept, or the self-conceiving conception of the concept. And the concept is nothing but the conception of itself. Which is what? I mean, that's another way to say what? Self-awareness, self-consciousness, in the most broad, like grand metaphysical sense you can say it. How long have we been going? We've been going for an hour. Wow, doesn't feel like it. Man, Hegel's slow reading, or I yap a lot. Probably the latter. 10. In this fashion, have I tried to portray consciousness in the phenomenology spirit. Consciousness is spirit as concrete, self-aware knowledge, to be sure, a knowledge bound to externality, but the progression of this subject matter, like the development of all natural and spiritual life, rests exclusively on the nature of the pure essentialities that constitute the content of the logic. That one should be bound by... I have to think about, whether I prefer bound by or bound to. Both of them are clear once you know what bound is doing, but I'm not sure which one is more immediately clear. So consciousness, spirit, as concrete. And consciousness, by the way, is just the structure of knowledge. It's the knower with the known, self-aware knowledge. And since consciousness is the structure of knowledge and spirit is self-consciousness, so it is self-aware knowledge, because the actual knowledge of consciousness is itself. So the knowing of knowing is the knowing of knowing. Absolute knowing of absolute knowing. To be sure, a knowledge bound to externality, but the progression of the subject matter, like the development of all natural and spiritual life, rests exclusively on the nature of the pure essentialities that constitute the content of the logic. Consciousness, as spirit, which on the way of manifesting itself frees itself from its immediacy and external concretion, attains to the pure knowledge that takes these same pure essentialities for its subject matter as they are in and for themselves. They are pure thoughts, spirit that thinks its essence. Their self-movement is their spiritual life and is that through which science constitutes itself and of which it is the exposition. So the phenomenology of spirit is spirit on the way of manifesting itself, which frees itself from its immediacy and external concretion, attains the pure knowledge that takes these same pure essentialities for its subject matter as they are in and for themselves. They are pure thoughts, so the pure essentialities of spirit are pure thoughts. Spirit that thinks its essence. And so thoughts are being identified with spirit right there. Well, actually, let me check what the Miller says. Let me see. Where is my Miller? How does Miller phrase it? 10. Spirit is a concrete knowing, a knowing too in which externality is involved, but develops this object, natural spiritual life, to do consciousness, spirit's manifestation, progress is free itself, takes the pure knowing which takes as its object those same pure essentialities as they are in and for themselves. They are pure thoughts, spirits thinking its own essential nature. That is... Okay, no, it's different, but it's a little slightly different emphasis, but it's the same thing essentially. Spirit thinking its own essential nature, or spirit that thinks its essence. Their self-movement is their spiritual life, and is that through which science constitutes itself. So thoughts are spirit, or rather, spirit is the generality of thought itself, the concept, which is, again, as I said, the self-conceiving concept of self-conception. And therefore, because of that, thoughts are self-movement. Their self-movement is their spiritual life, and is that through which science constitutes itself and of which it is the exposition. So, insofar as spirit exists, it is self-moving, and this self-movement, which is a self-internal interpenetration of thought and differentiation, this is concepts, this is thoughts, as we normally understand them to some extent. And obviously, what do we do with science? Any kind of science. All science happens through thought. Science is systematic, it's systematic knowledge. So you can't have systematic knowledge if you don't have thoughts. So insofar as spirit is the self-moving and self-generation, self-structuring of thoughts, a self-conceiving concept, it is that through which science constitutes itself, and so science constitutes itself. because science can't be given. Science isn't something that's based upon some external authority. Science validates itself as science, so it constitutes and determines itself as science. And therefore, this science of logic, as the science of thought, is also the exposition of pure science as such. Makes good sense to me. (11) The connection of the science that I call phenomenology of spirit to the logic is thereby stated. Yes, this will be saved. As regards the way it stands to it externally, a second part was intended to follow the first part of the system of science that contains the phenomenology. This second part would have contained the logic and both the two real sciences of philosophy, the philosophy of nature and the philosophy of spirit, and would have brought the system of science to completion. However, the necessary expansion which the logic demanded by itself has led me to have this particular part published separately. It therefore constitutes the first sequel to the phenomenology of spirit in an expanded plan of the system of science. I shall later follow up with a treatment of both the two mentioned real sciences of philosophy. This first volume of the logic contains the doctrine of being as Book 1, Book 2. The second section of the same volume, which contains the doctrine of essence, is already in the presses. Finally, the second volume will contain the subjective logic or the doctrine of the concept. So, I mean, this is one of the things that trips people up, in which, this book is, the science of logic is supposedly presuppositionless, and yet here Hegel's talking about, well, there's a book before it, and this is a sequel to that book. So how can the science of logic be presuppositionless? Well, it's kind of complicated. I wrote an article, what was it? Month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. I mean, I don't keep track of the time, quite honestly. The time just is a blur to me. I spent the time just working, eating, and sleeping this last year. Well, the last 2 years, quite frankly. And you don't pay attention. Plenty of times in which I didn't even know what day of the week it was. But why was I bring that up? I wrote an article explaining or giving one explanation internal to the science of logic. And there's multiple ways to frame this, because all it has to do is with, well, what is a presupposition anyways, and what is a validating procedure for knowledge. That article was specifically about existence and ground, where Hegel talks about how strangely enough, you can have something that's ungrounded, like a mere appearance, or something that's contingent, be the necessary ground for how you arrive at the necessary in the first place. So you start with a contingent, but because it is contingent, you necessarily have to regress into the ground. Hegel has the direct phrase is the transliteration of the German is just directly to go to ground, which is a phrase in German which just means, a thing dies or is destroyed. Obviously, that doesn't work in English. In English, the closest thing we have is to run into the ground. A thing runs into the ground in that, it's exhausted, it is done for. Basically destroyed. So that's the closest we have to that, and it does go closely with that meaning. That if you have something that's unessential, because it is unessential, it runs itself into the ground and reveals the essence. So through the unessential, you necessarily get to the essential or the necessary itself. But the unessential is not what justifies the essential. In an ultimate sense. It only does so in a retrospective sense. Only after you find out what the essential is and the connection to the unessential do you really have like a full justification for having arrived at the essential through the unessential. I don't know if that made any sense. I mean, it might be too nerdy. Too much stuck into the weeds of this stuff. And hello, what's this? Isn't that a space I see? Mr. Fontes, my reading of presuppositions in Hegel is that the problem with the presuppositions is that it requires dogmatically taking one side of a binary arbitrarily. This isn't present in Hegel because each side of the binary generates the other side, but let me know if I'm on the right track. I would say that's on the right track, yeah. I mean, like, the main problem is just pretty simple. Like, if you're going to begin, you can't begin in the middle. You have to begin at the beginning, and actually, that's what the essay with what must science begin, or with what must the science begin, basically goes over that explicitly, about how people say, "Oh, we want to start at the beginning," but they don't actually think about it in the way that they should as a beginning. That if it truly is the beginning, and they're not presupposing they know where it goes, they can't even treat it as a beginning, because the beginning is only a beginning insofar as it has an end. And if you don't know that there is an end, or such a thing as an end in the first place, because you can't be assuming categories, you can't even consider the beginning as beginning in the beginning, because you're genuinely beginning. And a beginning is something that is yet unknown. Let's see, how much time do we got? Well, how much time do we got? Well, I got all the time in the world. So, I mean, I shouldn't be I don't really have a time limit here. But we'll see until I get tired. We might make it through the second preface. Although, how long is the second preface? Where are we at? We're at 8:51. Preface, introduction, 21. Whew. Might be about 10 pages. Let's go with it. Prefaces, second edition. 12. I undertook this revision of the science of logic, of which the first volume is hereby being published, in full consciousness not only of the difficulty of its subject matter and of its exposition besides, but equally of the imperfection from which its treatment in the first edition suffers. And by the way, almost nobody reads the first edition, but there are significant changes in structure. Hegel categorize the divisions are different. Some concepts were rearranged, moved around. I think limit and something switched positions somewhere along the way. At least that's what one of the people in Rat in the Imperial Trail server on Discord told me. I haven't checked, and quite frankly, I don't want to check, mainly because it's bad enough to have, trying to keep track of one version of this. I don't really want to confuse myself, because then people start reading this other stuff, and they're like, oh, well, I think, this prior one might make more sense or not. You start confusing yourself, trying to be too clever and trying to fix what, doesn't need fixing if you didn't know that there was a problem. So I'm already somebody who's as you can tell, focused on fixing things that I don't need more problems to fix. I don't need to be aware of that. So I'm consciously not going to look at the first edition for a long time, if ever. Maybe if I ever disconnected. Let's see. Still offline. Still offline. Hello, hello. Is it reconnected yet? Let me know if it's reconnected yet. Let me. Hello, hello, hello. Let me check this real quick. Okay, it's working. Good. My chat was not working. Let me refresh that. All right, good. Sorry, my OBS is like it shows offline, but and then my stream was frozen. Where was I at? I was talking about the first edition. Oh yeah. Did I mention that one of the members on the Imperial Trail Discord server read it, and he kind of started getting confused because of it, and I have issues that I'm trying to solve already, and it's bad enough for one version. I don't really want to get into the weeds of Hegel's change of mind with certain reorderings. So I'm not going to be reading the first edition of the Science of Logic anytime soon, if ever. I would probably read it if I ever want to do my own rewrite of the Science of Logic, to just see if I might agree with certain previous orders, or if I have a different order that I think certain things might go in. But beyond that, I don't see the point in confusing yourself, quite frankly. It's bad enough. Anyways, we will get on. What is this thing? Okay, so continuing. 12. So I undertook this revision of Science of Logic, hereby published, first edition. So, as earnestly as I have striven after many years of further occupation with this science to remedy this imperfection, I still feel that I have cause enough to appeal to the reader's indulgence. One title to such appeal in the first instance may well be based on the circumstance that, for the most part, only external material was available for its content in the earlier metaphysics and logic. Although the practice of these disciplines had been universal and customary, in the case of logic down to our time, its interest in their speculative side has been just as universally and customarily bound. It is the same material which is repeated over and over again, whether it is thinned out to the point of trivial superficiality, or whether the ancient ballast is freshly trotted out and dragged to new lengths, so that through these habitually only mechanical efforts, no gain could be had for the philosophical content. So, I mean, Hegel's writing that, like, well, nobody had done a considered logic as a metaphysical science of the kind that he's working with before. So, I mean, he's the first, for sure. Second is that even though the material is at hand, the categories of metaphysics, which are also the categories of logic, were worked on. They were not necessarily worked on speculatively to like the greatest extent. There are actually exceedingly few speculative philosophers, genuinely speaking, in the history of philosophy. So it's a difficult position to be in, both in being the first and also just having to sift through a crapload of stuff. Luckily for Hegel, a lot of people already did much of the sifting for him. According to a scholar, he's not a Hegelian scholar, but he's a scholar of German idealism, particularly reflex philosophy, as he calls it, Daniel Pascal Zorn. He says, and I have no reason to doubt him on this, he says that Hegel's list of categories all come basically from Wolff, who is the major Leibnizian who dominated German philosophy before Kant. Would you say that there have been any philosophers since that undertook the logic's tasks? Not that I know of. Other people who have become aware of the problem of reflexivity, independent to Hegel and independent to German idealism, have come about. Even in the analytic camp, there are people who have become aware of this problem and have generally stepped up to the position that you find in the phenomenology spirit of something like a phenomenology of positions. But they're not doing this. They didn't make the jump from the reflexivity of thinking to the connection to the structure of metaphysical reality itself. The here should be bounded. Probably makes clear sense. So, 13. To display the realm of thought philosophically, that is, in its own immanent activity, or what is the same, in its necessary development, had to be, therefore, a new undertaking, one that had to be started right from the beginning. Nevertheless, the received material, the known thought forms, must be regarded as an extremely important fund, even a necessary condition, a presupposition to be gratefully acknowledged, even though what it offers here and there is only a bare thread, the dead bones of a skeleton thrown together in a disorderly heap. 14. The forms of thought are first set out and stored in human language, and one can hardly be reminded often enough nowadays that thought is what differentiates the human being from the beast. In everything that the human being has interiorized, in everything that in some way or other has become for him a representation, in whatever he has made his own, there has language penetrated, and everything that he transforms into language and expresses in it contains a category, whether concealed, mixed, or well-defined. So much is logic natural to the human being, it is indeed his very nature. If we, however, contrast nature as such, as the realm of the physical, with the realm of the spiritual, then we must say that logic is the supernatural element that permeates all his natural behavior, his ways of sensing, intuiting, desiring, his needs and impulses, and it thereby makes them into something truly human, even though only formally human, makes them into representations and purposes. Yep, I mean, Hegel has the classical stance that, what makes us human is we're rational creatures, we think. We say logic is a supernatural element, and a lot of people go like, logic isn't supernatural, it's all just neurons in your brain. Oh yeah? Explain being a nothing. Good luck explaining that with neurons. Ain't gonna happen. Explain cause and effect. Good luck. Explain that with neurons. Ain't gonna happen. I literally had, well, the other day I was streaming a discussion on politics. I didn't take I unlisted the VOD. I still have it. I just didn't think it was worth much, but I did spend 4 hours streaming and just chatting with people. And one of the people was just like this. They're like, it's just neurons in your head, man. But he also believed in causality. He believed that you could assume causality and that you can prove it empirically in some way. That you could see causality, and this guy was just dense. Did not even get the basic criticisms of Hume. Logic and thought just aren't something physical. You can't understand them by any physical means. No physical representation accords with them at all. Forms, just cannot be explained through matter. Matter has, and under no circumstance, any kind of form. Forms only belong to us. Actually, yesterday I was talking with a guy and arguing about that too. He was adamant, no, we're the ones who project distinctions onto the world. The world itself is just, a simple, unity that, is coherent with itself, but it doesn't make distinctions between this thing or that thing. And he just could not understand that he was basically using the very concept he was denying to make this distinction between actual reality and himself. That, these forms are not merely nominal. So then we must say that logic's supernatural element permeates all his natural behaviors, his ways of sensing, to desiring his needs and impulses. The distinction between distinction and indifference. That's basically what I brought up to him. You're making a distinction between that which is indistinct or indeterminate versus that which is distinct or determinate. And that itself is a determinacy. It's a distinction. And, you can't get away from that you have to use that. And at the same time, you're saying that it's not real, so why are you using it? So anyways, logic permeates all his logic as thinking, permeates all his natural behavior, his ways of sensing, intuiting, desiring, his needs and impulses. Insofar as we're human, everything that we do for a reason. Animals do things because they have impulses, but we do things because we have reasons. We are conscious of what we're doing, even if it is only a representation, but nonetheless, we are conscious of it. We have an abstract notion of it. Representations are not pure thoughts, but they're also not pure sensations. They're not pure feelings. They are partial thought and partial feeling. So, insofar as we see things as informed by what we conceive to be seeable. Insofar as we intuit things, same thing. Insofar as we desire things, look at how many things people desire just based on the fact that they conceive that they are desired, that they can be desired, or that they are objects of desire. If you're an atheist, you don't understand why people desire God. People are just like, people just are afraid of death, or afraid of being alone, or afraid that the world ultimately doesn't care about them. But the atheist can't even make himself desire that, because essentially they don't believe in it and they can't see it. Our needs, what we consider a need, is basically conceptual. We say, I need a phone, I need a car, I need this, I need that, I need entertainment. Nothing natural about these things. These things are social culture. They're cultural, they're social, they're historical, they're bounded in thought. It is to the advantage of a language when it possesses a wealth of logical expressions that its distinctive expressions specifically set aside for thought determinations. This is being, existence, activity, cause, effect, blah, blah, blah. All of these are, logical expressions. They're logical operators. They're metaphysical structures as well. Many of the prepositions and articles already pertain to relations based on thought. In this, the Chinese language has apparently no advanced not advanced that far culturally, or at least not far enough. Now, that might be a prejudice of Hegel, in that the grammar of Chinese language is simple. It's simpler than, say, our language, the English or Spanish, or, well, most other European languages. They have a far more advanced grammar because the structure of the sentence has to carry a lot more of the meaning. In Chinese, obviously, especially in written Chinese, which is distinct from spoken Chinese, the written Chinese, you have logograms rather than like phonetic words. And so their concepts, not words, properly speaking. And so those logograms can carry far more of the meaning than our words can. So they don't need a lot of the grammatical mechanics that we had to develop due to our phonetic style. That's as far as I understand it, and I'm not a great understander of language, so don't believe me, but look it up. It's interesting. So, but such particles play a totally subordinate role, only slightly more independent than that of prefixes and suffixes, inflections, and the like. Much more important is that in a language the categories should be expressed as substantives and verbs, and thus be stamped into objective form. Substantives, nouns, verbs. Verbs are actions, or substantives corresponds to the objectivity, like the thing, and then the verbs, the subjectivity, like thinking, or concept and conceiving. In this respect, the German language has many advantages over other modern languages, for many of its words also have the further peculiarity of carrying not just different meanings, but opposite ones. And in this, one cannot fail to recognize the language's speculative spirit. It can delight thought to come across such words and to discover in naive form. That's a weird eye. To discover in naive form, already in lexicon as one word of opposite meanings, that union of opposites, which is the result of speculation, but to the understanding is nonsensical. Philosophy, as a matter of fact, on that, English is not too bad on this either. Like I posted something, in the last year, I've been focusing a lot more on this, where English has quite a few contradictory phrases. It's mostly phrases, but also single words as well, which is very interesting. If you're willing to sound a bit awkward, which I mean, speculative thinking does sound initially a bit awkward. You can mess around with speculative English just as well. Philosophy therefore stands in no need of special terminology. True, some words are to be taken from foreign languages, yet through use these have already acquired citizenship in and an affected purism in it. And an affected purism would be all the more out of place where everything depends on the meaning the most. So, I mean, this is Hegel doing what everybody in philosophy says that they have this as an ideal, that they want to speak as simply as possible, as the most basic and universal as possible, and yet a lot of people just end up making shit up because they got nothing better to do, especially analytics. My God, for a bunch of people who complain about, unintelligible gobbledygook, these people just make up words and don't even look up who has had a concept about what, when, or how. Like, you have parallel traditions of, like, almost everything in analytic philosophy of people cloistered in their own terminology and not sharing terminology, and so just coming up with the same theories, but not being aware that other people came up with them. And each one just makes up their own, like, new words for them. So the advance of culture in general, and of the sciences in particular, even the empirical sciences which are bound to the senses and generally operate in the medium of the most common categories, for example, whole and parts, a thing and its properties, and the like, gradually fosters the rise of thought relations that are also more advanced, or it at least raises them to the wider universality and consequently brings them to greater notice. Well, in German, Heidegger probably is simpler. But I'm of the opinion that Heidegger is like hyper German. His thinking relies a lot on the peculiarity of associations in German language, in German etymology particularly. And so things that work in German just cannot work in other languages. And so it's not that you can't translate the concepts, but when you translate them, it reads even more awkwardly than it does in German by far. And the only way to get rid of that is to just do what Heidegger did with German, but do it with English. And do it with all the resources that are available in the English, which is Greek, French, Latin, German, what is it? The Old English. So we have roots all over the place, and we can exploit a lot of those. So we could do what Heidegger does, and when we do that, just like Heidegger's untranslatable, we become untranslatable too. And untranslatable doesn't mean that it's beyond understanding in other languages. It's just that it becomes cumbersome in other languages, and the only way to fix that is to just repeat the process of how one comes up with those words and associations and concepts with your own language rather than a foreign language. And so one of the things that I like about Hegel is that you may not believe this, people don't believe this, but Hegel does not use very complicated language. Hegel has very few coined terms. In German, he has no coined terms. In English, the only coined term really is in the translation of sublation, which I don't use. Beyond that, it's regular words. And Hegel is understandable in regular terms. He doesn't go by dictionaries, but if you don't think in dictionaries, but you instead pay attention to how things are used, he's not unintelligible. So Hegel is a very... He takes this very seriously, and I wish everybody would take that seriously in philosophy. So the events of culture in general science, particular empirical sciences, bound to senses, operating the medium of the most common categories. So the fact that basic categories become focused on in the sciences, this does open up a deeper level of thought for other people, because these become diffused in the culture over time. And you notice that, right? Scientific lingo, science speak, gets into the general populace for bad reasons. People are throwing around quantum this, quantum that, information, all these other things. But nonetheless, this does give a deeper sense of thinking and reality to people, to the regular person. And even when you're part of a science in which that lingo is not generalized, people don't pick it up because it's not so exciting. Nonetheless, the fact that it's there, it's being developed by somebody, and it's being put out there, it raises certain categories that have importance and that other people aren't focusing on to wider universality. And so gives them greater notice, as he says, which is true. It's also why, part of that too is that you have to not be cloistered in your communication, right? Why is it that Hegelian conceptions aren't well known? Well, because Hegelians only talk to Hegelians. Hegelian professors only talk to Hegelian students. Of course, this is not going to get onto the wider world. Why would it? This is just a bunch of nerds circle jerking each other. But if you as a Hegel enjoyer go ahead and use these concepts, which one, they're already common words by and large, but two, even if they're not common words, like say like being for self, or presence, whatever, and you use them in a more technical sense, but it's intelligible to other people, you can be part of deepening the understanding and the capacity of other people to think. It's not just about giving people a formal system of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or other crap, abstract, negative, concrete. That's not important. What's important is give people the tools of thought. Just promulgating the correct versus true distinction is a massive boon to the everyday person. The everyday person isn't even aware that such a distinction could even exist. And once you point it out, it's a very interesting and fascinating one. So stuff like that, important. 15. In physics, for instance, where the predominant category previously was that of force, it is the category of polarity that now plays the most significant role. And in the last 100 years, during Hegel's century, the 1800s, it was electromagnetism, and then after that, it became fields. Now fields is like the main thing. People don't care about forces or polarity. They talk about fields. So in physics, for instance, where the predominant category, let me restart. 15. In physics, for instance, where the predominant category previously was that of force, it is the category of polarity that now plays the most significant role. A category which, incidentally, is randomly being imposed all too often on everything, even on light. It defines a difference in which the different terms are inseparably bound together, and it is indeed of infinite importance that an advance has thereby been made beyond the abstractive form of identity by which a determinant such as, for example, that of force, acquires independent status in the determining form of difference. The difference that at the same time remains an inseparable moment of identity is instead brought to the forefront and is given general acceptance. This thing about light, by the way, Hegel does not think about light in the physical sense that people were thinking about even in his day. People were thinking about, in his day, there was already the debate between Leibniz, who was for light being a wave, and Newton, who was for light being particles. One, this debate was not settled, and two, Hegel thinks about light more like Aristotle does. He thinks about light more in regards to its relationship as a dimension of reality, a dimension of the physical. Light is itself not visible as light. Light is invisible. Light is the medium of colors. Light is the medium of sight. And so there's some physicality involved, but light itself is not physical to Hegel. And so this whole thing about light being polarized and whatnot doesn't make sense within that framework. And it's not that you can't speak about the polarization of light. I mean, polarization just means that light has distinct. It can be, and as a matter of fact, polarity isn't really the right thing to say, because it's not like a positive negative distinction. Polarity in light just means that light can be given directional structure, which it can, and we know that it can. So, Hegel's position doesn't really negate that. But it is odd. It's closer to Aristotle. It's closer to Goethe. Physicists would definitely not recognize what the hell he's talking about regarding light. So let's see. It defines the difference on which the different terms are inseparably bound together, and it is indeed of infinite importance that an advance has ever been made beyond the abstracted form of identity, by which a determinant is such as, for example, that a force acquires independent status, and the determining form of difference, the difference that at the same time remains an inseparable element of identity, is instead brought to the forefront, is given to general acceptance. So in polarity, you have a unity in difference. That a polarity is you have to have two things which are also inseparably bound. And that's a higher principle than identity or mere difference. The study of nature. Gotta go through this and switch all the natures. The study of nature, because of the stable reality of its objects, is inevitably led to fixed categories that can no longer be ignored in it, even if the complete disregard for consistency towards other categories which are also allowed to stand. It is not given room for abstracting from opposition and moving on to generality, and so easily happens when spirit is the object. So, the study of things out there, you're looking at stable objects. They're physical, they're material, they're there for a while. So it makes sense that we focus on the fixity of things, on the static nature, and we mistake these to be static categorically. So even if with complete disregard for consistency towards other categories which are also allowed to stand. You never hear this unless you get really into the weeds of like kind of fringe science. And that is that, or with people who are particularly interested in interdisciplinary science, which is that many sciences don't have a discourse with each other. The people working in general relativity don't talk to the geologists or the planetary geologists either. So in their theories, they posit many things that geologists would tell you aren't possible and that are counterfactual to what we know about geology today. So there are many contradictions among the sciences because they don't share frameworks, because they don't operate with a view towards having a shared framework. And so people are just kind of doing their things here, doing their things there. And unbeknownst to them, they're in contradiction, that, their theories falsify each other. But they don't know that, and, the vast majority don't care. Limonetto, it's strange seeing nature described as stable. As a physicist, I always associated, physics student, I always associated nature to movement. That is the case today, but it wasn't the case in Hegel's day. In Hegel's day, remember, the primary model was Newtonianism, and then even then, your view comes out of quantum mechanics, in which there's a portion of quantum mechanics in which it's very static, and there's a portion of it which is very dynamic. But before that, even then, look at general relativity, right? It's not essentially dynamic; it's essentially static, and the main thing is just to keep track of the dynamism. But the dynamism is not inherent to anything. In quantum mechanics, it's the only one that violates this, because in quantum mechanics, anything kind of goes depending on what you're focusing on. You can have virtual particles just bubbling up from the ether of nothing, in the middle of space, vacuum energy and whatnot. And so the vacuum is essentially always dynamic. It's always in movement, always in motion, always producing and annihilating. It's just a constant becoming, a churning, and a constant upheaving. In a full sense. But otherwise, it's very static. You look at the fundamental table of particles. Well, the table of fundamental particles, right? Those are pretty static. They're not very dynamic. The picture of the universe that we have, it's pretty static. It's not very dynamic. Unless you have a cyclical view of the universe, which is kind of a minority position. Most people believe in the Big Chill, for example. The universe will eventually just wind down and everything's just gonna stop, decay into pure light radiation into the void. Oh man, how much more do we have? 16. 22, 32. We're barely halfway. Barely halfway, and we're about 2 hours in, aren't we? All right. We'll leave it at 16. We'll start there next time, and I'll see if I do this every day. It'll give me something to do. It'll give me a reason to read this and think about it on the fly. And I'll probably do some write-ups on this as well, and it'll be on my blog at some point. Speculative scientist. Oh, hey, Avalonia, what's up? The static stable aspect of nature that Hegel is referring to is the being of nature as thought. Yeah, that would be it too. It's just like the fixity of the understanding. He's not saying that nature itself is stable, but that it looks stable to consciousness because of the way we think about it. Or not the way it is about the way we think about it, but it's also just like the temporality of it. The fact, the mountains don't seem to change, from day to day or year to year. They change on the scales of millions of years. Atoms, supposedly take billions of years to decay, when they're stable. All that stuff. Luke Fontes. I was reading Holgrate's on being. He mentioned that Hegel misinterprets Kant, specifically on the thing itself. Yeah, probably. I mean, the German idealists and most post-Kantians, in those 25 years up to Hegel, misunderstood Kant. But the main thing is what is being understood. Hegel is not interested in what people say they believe. Hegel is interested in what is inherent to what they have to believe given the structures of concepts that they have put forth. It does not make a difference whether you qualify your Parmenides and you qualify being with a bunch of predicates to try to say something you intend, because your intention is false. Your intention does not follow along with what the initial determination of that concept requires of you. So is Hegel misrepresenting Kant according to what Kant would say about himself and would claim that he believed? Probably, yeah. I mean, and I would say that's almost certain for everybody Hegel talks about, because Hegel's not interested in their view of themselves. He doesn't care. That's not important to Hegel. What's important to Hegel is what is the actual thought that's being had. Paul Biner, Biner. Hey, what do you think about Nietzsche's criticism of Hegel and post-structuralism? I mean, what is there to say about Nietzsche's criticism of anybody, quite frankly? I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think you read Nietzsche because he has good insights on anybody specifically. You kind of just read Nietzsche because you like Nietzsche's original insights of his own. Just like Heidegger, just like Hegel, these people project their interests on other people, and they judge them via that interest. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you're a genuine you have a worldview and you're genuinely trying to be systematic, even slightly, You're going to have to do that because you think you're right about what they think more than they were right about what they think. So why would you care what they think about themselves? Limonetto, I was reading Hegel along with Kant, and the one thing I noticed, and some commentators did also remark, is that Kant has a concept of transcendental affinity of the matters of intuition in the first edition of the Critique. I've never read the Critique of Pure Reason, neither the first. I have a copy, digital copy, free version, a few copies from different translations, but. What I am aware of, there are major differences between the first edition and second edition, and some arguments completely change. I've listened to Robert Paul Wolff's lectures, and I think Robert Paul Wolff reads Kant as basically a psychologist ultimately, and he particularly points out this pretty damning little sentence in the first edition in which Kant basically admits to it. And he says, you could see me as saying this, but I'm not really saying that. But he has no defense as to why you shouldn't interpret what he's saying in that way. Because you totally can, and he's saying it in that way. And in the second edition, that whole paragraph is removed and changed for something else. Paul Biner. Have you heard of dark Marxism? Probably. I mean, I don't know what it's about. I mean, it's probably for dorks. Dork Marxism is a thing, yeah, that's for sure. I mean, quite frankly, I've been out of touch with Marxism for like a decade. Ever since I got into Hegel, I stopped paying attention to Marxism. Anyways, let me end this stream and I'll just open up a second stream. I'll get in politics, see if anybody's interested in a little philosophy chat.